Good morning and welcome to Top in Business. This is a platform which gives you the most incisive discussions around the issues of business, finance, and many times industry. And speaking of industry, it is why that we are here for the Clean Energy, the 5th edition, I should say, of the Clean Energy Conference under the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. The theme this year is to focus on sustaining the clean energy market in Kenya. We are all well aware of the fact that Kenya has made significant strides in terms of tapping into renewable sources, accounting for as large as 70% of its energy capacity. But now the question we seek to raise here is how can we further these gains? What are some of the roles that the private sector as well as the public sector will be expected to play in terms of ensuring the country remains ahead of the pack when it comes to renewable energy? And to help us in this conversation, we have a distinguished panel with me where I have Mr. Samuel Muiru, who is the head of engineering at the East African Breweries Limited. We have Phyllis Wakiaga, who is the chief executive at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We have Madam Wangari Mushiri, who is a board member at the Kenya Green Building Society. And the angle in this, we're having the Green Building Society, is just to ensure that we can have a conversation around how buildings and the constructions we make can adhere to the requirements of clean energy by global standards. And finally, we'll have Mr. Jitu Joshi, who is a plant manager at Mombasa Cement. We appreciate the kind of capacity they consume as far as energy is concerned, and what are some of the things they are doing as industry players in terms of enabling us as a country to realize the goals we have set on a clean energy standpoint. We are expecting a representative from the government who will be joining us anytime. The PS was meant to be with us, but because of inevitable circumstances, he's not able to, but nonetheless, we'll have a very constructive conversation. And just to help us further with this, we have a distinguished audience with us representing stakeholders from across the industry, whether it is in private sector, whether it is in government, donor partners, who will also be part of this conversation, and we'll be bringing them on board by way of questions as this conversation continues. But for now, we'd like to kick off on the discussion, and I'd like to mention just something. In the State of the Nation address last week, the President spoke at length about Kenya's renewable capacity, and also just bringing back what he said during the launch of the Unit 6 of Olkaria 1 in December last year, where he was speaking about transitioning the country into fully renewable energy by 2020. And that's where I'd like us to start this conversation, and just to get the views from the panel. If I could start with you, Samuel Muiru. Getting Kenya into fully renewable energy capacity by 2020, do you feel this is a goal that can be realized given the timeline that has been set?
Good morning, viewers. Thank you for this session. I would speak from the perspective of the private sector, especially from EABL, where we are domiciled as Kenya Breweries. I think the topic on energy and conservation and efficiency and the footprint reduction and all the things that we are doing in collaboration with the government is something that cannot be gainstated. It is either we do it or we perish. Reasons: one, you can already foresee and can already see the kind of weather patterns that we have. In normal circumstances, for example, around this time, April, we expect to be having serious rainfall in this country. You can see the adversity and the effects that this has culminated into. So when we talk about energy, at whatever platform we talk about it, whether it is private, government, social enterprise, wherever, this debate cannot be forestalled, it cannot be postponed. It's a debate that we need to have today. So if close and true to your question, it's something that we really have to focus on. It's something that we have to do completely ruthlessly and in a way that we cannot go backwards. It's a commitment that you have to make. It's an irrevocable request that you have to make, and a strong commitment that each one of us, wherever we sit, whatever role we play, have to really play it right.
All right. And Phyllis, just to bring you on board in this conversation, in terms of the targets we are setting for transitioning into renewable energies as a country, from the manufacturer's umbrella, do you feel, one, this is a realizable target, and what can private sector as itself do in terms of realizing this?
Thank you very much for the question, and also for being with us today during the Clean Energy Conference and Expo. I think this conference, first of all, is a demonstration that the industry is keen about renewable energy. It's a conversation that we have every year to see what more can we do to ensure that we sustain and grow the clean energy market in Kenya. For the industry, a little bit of a background. We definitely know that energy cost is one of the inputs into manufacturing, and it's something that we have to keep managing as industries. And when we have conversations with government, it's mainly around the cost of energy, the reliability, and the quality of that energy. In the last 6 years, we've seen a growth in the grid, the energy grid. We were at about 1,600 megawatts. We've seen it grow to over 2,700 megawatts. What has happened also is that we've seen a move into more renewable energy. There's been more investment in geothermal, hydro, wind. So a lot of renewable energy has come into the grid. So as a country today, our energy mix is actually largely renewable, which I think is positive. In terms of the numbers in 2017, which have definitely changed, we had 46% from geothermal, 27% from hydro, and 24% from thermal. But I know that has changed because we've also seen the wind kick in from Lake Turkana, and this is something positive. So I think as a country, we're headed in the right direction. With that type of energy mix, we're, as a country, demonstrating that we are responsible and actually being cognizant of the fact that we need to be concerned about environmental conservation. It also means lower cost of power because some of those renewable energy sources are coming into the grid at below 10 US cents per kilowatt hour. So it balances out the mix and makes it more affordable for consumers, especially manufacturers. As industries, we've seen also a lot of investment. Manufacturers also moving into renewable energy in their own factories. We carry out energy audits for our members, and out of the audits, they've been able to invest some of them in renewable energy sources for their own use within the factory. So it's something that's happening, and as my fellow panelists said, it's something that we can't run away from, because as a society, we have to be responsible about how we consume our energy, and that is already happening within the manufacturing sector, and there's room to do even more as a government and as a manufacturing sector.
Okay. And Wangari, just to get your thoughts around this matter, when you talk about the green building society and some of the goals that perhaps you might have set, when you talk about the construction sector in this country, are you seeing a move where constructors are becoming increasingly conscious of the need to have compliance in terms of the requirements of green standards, which are set also across the globe?
Yes, definitely we're seeing that happening in the construction industry. I think just to kind of lay down the foundation, 40% of energy that we use globally, or even in Africa it's a bit higher, it's about 45%, is used in buildings. So that's a large area that we can either expand renewable energy or decrease our consumption. And that's why it's becoming a lot more a focus in the construction industry. Our energy is an enabler. The Big Four agenda has some of the elements that we are now focusing on, especially affordable housing. And what good would it be if somebody lives in an affordable house but can't afford their electricity bill, can't afford their water bill, and that's where renewable energy comes in. We want to make sure that we have low-cost energy, low-cost sustainable energy, which is why it's becoming more of a focus.
All right. And Jitu, just now from an industry standpoint, Mombasa Cement is definitely one of the key players in this space. What is the company doing as far as compliance with the green energy requirements is concerned, looking at the kind of production you put out on an per year basis?
Good morning. Now first I want to just brief you about what we are talking about, clean energy and renewable energy. Like clean energy means energy which we are producing by using zero emission. And then renewable energy we are getting from biomass or windmill or other sources. But as an industry, cement industry is mainly a dust generation and dust handling system. So there some renewable energy like solar is not possible. So in that case, what our management with our technical team, we decided to use the same amount of energy but increase the production. So our kilowatt hour per ton in total what we were using earlier and what we are using now, it has reduced against compared to the production. So in other way, we are saying we are saving whatever energy we are getting. So that energy may be used for other sources where the required in the country. Yes. So our ultimate goal is to save energy for better tomorrow.
Correct. Correct. And just one of the key discussions which has shaped public discourse in the recent past has been the new energy laws which were passed by the president just some time last month. It was initially the Energy Bill of 2017, it was signed into law. And in there we have the provision for the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation. I don't know, from the panel's perspective, how do you see this impacting the landscape, especially now from the EABL view? How do you see this impacting the landscape in terms of clean and renewable energy, and how industry can move forward with these new regulatory provisions?
To bring the matter close to how we operate at East African Breweries, our energy mix is in the ratio of 70-30, 70% thermal, 30% electrical energy. Now, the areas where you have seen huge potential for bringing this matter closer to ourselves is in the area of electrical energy. Now, the energy platform that we sit on currently is completely taken to an extent of very high efficiency, and therefore we are looking for further re-engineering processes, for example, use of renewable, and as you correctly put it, really we are really focusing on that area. We have put in our pipeline a very huge capital project for the coming financial year, where we'll use quite a substantial amount of money to, first of all, recover one, biogas, which we produce on site out of our waste treatment plant. We can get that, tap the methane gas, clean it up, and use it for our boiler running. Continually, we are also getting into biomass, 100% substitution of fossil fuel, 100% substitution to become a carbon-less factory, a carbon-less industry, and reduce our footprint in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the other area that we are looking at. We have also lined up in our capital pipeline a huge capital expense for tapping solar energy. We want to tap about 4 megawatts of energy using our usual roofs and the ground that is not in use. So it's a matter that we are really embracing. It's a matter that we continually see as a business, as a matter that will run us there. Our energy cost is high, so to speak. It influences our conversion costs to a great extent, and therefore our bottom line, if just to speak it, I meant to talk like that. But what we also want to see is a regulatory process that also governs how these things happen. We know there's a framework, and the government has set up a framework through Renewable Energy Authority. But what we would like to see as a business as well is to see a very strong cross-functional integration of ourselves in the private sector and the government, of course. And this has been done. And Kenya's Association of Manufacturers has become one of the strongest platforms for that discussions. We've connected heavily with KEM to also take us to the next level in terms of IGA, energy grade audits. And some of the things that they have picked from those audits is tapping our renewable energy sources and converting them into use. So it's really a platform that is what you would call a burning platform for us, because we know where it can take us.
All right. And just before I get the views from Phyllis Wakiaga, I just need to remind you that this conversation can be followed online under the hashtag KMCleanEnergy2019. That's on all social media platforms. That is Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram, if you will. And we are on Top in Business, which is definitely a partnership between NTV and the Business Daily, bringing you this conversation on the 5th edition of the Clean Energy Conference. And Phyllis, just to get back to this matter of the new regulatory framework which has been passed in place, how do you expect this will impact the landscape in terms of getting into this clean renewable energy drive?
Thank you very much. We've been quite instrumental in working around the energy bill, and as an association we were happy when it was signed into law by His Excellency the President. CAM has actually been hosting the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation on behalf of the Ministry of Energy at the association since the year 2006. What the center has focused on is, first of all, to build capacity within industry, to ensure that we have the right skills to undertake energy audits and to give advisory to business on matters relating to energy. We've also been working with industries to undertake energy audits, and out of those audits, also hand-holding them to ensure that they implement what comes out of those energy audits. So we've been able to carry out over 1,000 audits. We've trained quite a number of certified energy managers and also people who are experts in measurement and verification. What the energy laws are doing, there are new institutions that have been created, and as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we are keen to see how we institutionalize a lot of the work we've been doing under the Center for Energy Efficiency and Management, because there's a big opportunity for us to scale up and be more impactful in the work we've been doing. So some of the new bodies that have been set up under the Energy Act would be key partners of the center to ensure that we institutionalize and really make the work that has been happening over the last, since 2006, almost 15 years, something that is institutionalized. If you look at something like the Energy Management Awards, we'll be having the 15th edition on Friday. And one of the conversations that we've been driving with ERC is how do we give an incentive for the people who win? So that over and above winning, how do we come up with a structure within, whether it's ERC or any of the new bodies, that recognizes and gives additional incentive to the people who participate and win the Energy Management Awards. So we are keen to work with the different institutions as they get set up to see how we can continue and grow the work we've been doing under the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Wangari, Phyllis has spoken a lot about auditing, and just to ensure that there's almost a reward system which ensures that those who excel in this become a testament of what can be done at an industry level. From the building and construction side, how effective are these audits being undertaken just to ensure that at least we are at par at an industry level?
In terms of the building side of things, we're now trying to align ourselves with KAM. There have been the energy audits that have been undertaken for the last few years as they were signed into law. But we're finding that also the green building side of things, where you measure your building, is according to, one, the energy audit, but two, you're not only looking at energy, you're looking at water, you're looking at waste, and looking at taking it as a all-rounded, taking an all-rounded view of the building industry, and pairing that with renewable energy, with clean tech, is where the industry is heading. I'd also like to add, in terms of the question that you had asked before, in regard to how the new energy bill will really affect what's coming into play, or the lay of the landscape. And I think there are three ways that would happen. I think the first one, with the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation that was founded as one of the bodies, one of the three bodies, there's a specific mandate to mobilize funding, which is a big, I cannot stress how big of an issue it is in renewable energy. Getting the right funding, de-risking the funding. So because we have that as a mandate of these new bodies, that's something that's really going to push how we see renewable energy and clean tech being taken up in the industry. I think the second way in which we found that this new energy bill that's coming in, we're going to find that there's a lot of climate change elements been taken into account. So we've seen last year with all the rains, with our dams becoming damaged, with rain not coming at the expected time, or more than higher heat than we've had before. That is going to also be included in, or has already been included in the energy bill, and I think that's going to be a big impact on renewable energy. Just helping people decide what type of energy do they employ in their buildings. And then the third element that I think it's going to be a big change with the new energy bill is the liberalization of the power sector. We're having a lot of new bills coming in, such as wheeling of energy, where you can produce energy outside the city and use the Kenya grid to wheel it to a building, specifically to a certain off-taker. And so that will also help us just move away from having one off-taker, such as KPLC or Kenya Power, and having more and more people who say, I'm building a building in Upper Hill, and I'm investing in a solar farm outside and wheeling the power through Kenya Power. And so we'll see a lot of that happening, a lot of the liberalization happening in the power sector as well.
All right, some powerful nuggets there. You've actually preempted our next conversation, which is in terms of mobilization of funding and the feed-in tariffs, which are dealt in exhaustively in the bill. But Jitu, just to get your thoughts, your initial thoughts on the new regulatory framework, how do you see it shaping the landscape?
Yeah, actually, as I earlier also told you, that cement industries, some renewable energy, which is practically not possible. So we decided to reduce the whatever energy we are using and give a more production. So our ultimate, and we are also working for the solar for our offices or street lights, periphery walls, light, everywhere, where we can easily use that solar lights. But we are still working on it. But mainly our target is to energy efficiency. Correct. So whatever we were using earlier and what we are using now is almost, we can say, from 41 kilowatt per ton, now we achieve to 33.5 kilowatt per ton now as on date. So our target is to reduce the kilowatt hour per ton.
Yeah. All right, good thoughts there in terms of efficiency, in terms of consumption and production. And just to get back to this conversation on mobilization of funding, we have had a feed-in tariff policy in Kenya from as early as 2008. And I think one of the recurrent issues that the private sector has been raising is that it is not sufficient in terms of catalyzing mobilization of funding for investment in this. When you look at the new regulations and the provisions therein, do you feel enough consideration has been given in terms of attracting private investment into the renewable energy space? If I could start with you, Brad.
I think a lot of bills have been put into that, into coming up with that bill, and I feel in the private sector, and for example, where we sit, that platform has actually been given, that provision has actually been taken care of. We are approached by investors every day coming to our site to see what opportunities we can co-work on, what opportunities we can sit, work, and deal with, especially in the area of PPAs. It's a growing platform, and it's quite rich. And I think it's something that businesses should embrace. And thanks to KAM, for example, because they have taken our guys through the Certified Energy Managers course, the CMVPs. So we have people on site, for example, at Kenya Breweries who can work and deal with these projects, look at what the investor is bringing on board, check whether it's bankable or not, and actually either qualify it or disqualify it at that level. So I think the bill really articulates that issue clearly, and we feel quite supported when it comes to the private sector as matters pertaining to that sort of tapping investment from outside is concerned. However, as a business, we also like investing internally. We have a huge portfolio of brands that do well in the market, so we also like, as much as possible, sweating our own selves to check whether investment can be done internally before we go to external funding and all that. But however, for consequences that are beyond self or that are beyond the business, then of course we go to other sources of funding. So it's a welcome approach, and we feel that if we get connected at this level, we will be able to change the terrain of the renewable energy platform in the years to come.
Ongari, you seem to be burning with a
Sorry,
point.
yes, I just wanted to add to what he's just said. 87% of the risk in a renewable energy project is at the beginning, in the early stages of a project. So making sure that it's bankable, making sure that even the different components, the professionals are all on board to make sure that it's as profitable as possible. And in terms of that type of financing, a lot of people do not want to put their money in an early stage project. They want it de-risked by the World Bank, by the IFC, and by other bigger players who are difficult to get the money from initially. So it's kind of cat chasing its own tail. So I think in terms of, I mean, there is funds that have come up, Sustainable Energy for All Fund and a few others, who help with that de-risking. But I think the key thing that we probably would need to look at in terms of funding is new creative ways of funding these projects. So let's say crowdfunding, which throwing it out there right now might sound a bit weird, but what about using it like how the real estate companies have used REITs, real estate investment trusts, and where you can buy a portion of a renewable energy system and invest in that, and you have a de-risked finance method rather than going with one financier, or even using blended capital where some people finance the beginning of the project, somebody else finances the center, and somebody else finances the operation and maintenance. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of renewables and in terms of implementing the projects, and I think we're just scratching the surface. But as I said before, I'm glad that this funding thing has now become a mandate of these bodies so that we can now de-risk all this capital that's coming in for renewable projects.
And just to bring in Phyllis, there's a lot of conversation around the need to de-risk these projects, especially at the start. And one of the developments we've had in the market, just speaking from what Wangari has said in terms of innovative ways of financing some of these projects. Last year, towards the end, there was this launch of the Kenya Green Bond Program, and we're looking at entities which are predominantly in the renewable energy space. If they could be issuing bonds in the capital markets and just raising this capital, do you feel this could be the silver bullet which begins to rescript this narrative in terms of how we can raise capital?
Thank you for that. You're right that financing is one of the key challenges of getting into renewable energy. And as an association, when we started carrying out the energy audits, and we would advise businesses to either do something to be more energy efficient or invest in renewable energy, we noted that gap. So we've been working with partners over the years. Initially, we were doing work with the DFID to carry out pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, because that's the only way you can be able to identify what the project is about and really just work around de-risking the project. And further to that, we've been working also with AFD and partner banks in Kenya to finance renewable and energy efficient projects. We've been able to finance 26 such projects in the country to a tune of about $72 million has been disbursed through this financing. So that has been one way we have at least worked with manufacturers and other people in other sectors to ensure that we are developing a credit line that can be able to facilitate them to get into renewable energy or energy efficiency. There are other ways we can look at expanding that. The issues of crowdsourcing. The Green Bonds is also a very good initiative. Kenya Bankers Association is also reaching out to come to see how can we work together around the implementation. But it is an attractive option and way of fundraising for companies even like Kengen through the Green Bonds. Yeah.
Jitu, in terms of financing in the solar space, do you feel there's adequate support coming your way as key players in this domain? We are aware there's been the Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access Project, which the government has really touted in terms of helping to plug in some of the deficits in terms of financing that might exist. Do you feel you're receiving the adequate support you might need?
No, actually at present, whatever investment we are doing in terms of energy efficiency, we are doing our own. But here KM representative is here. So our request, they will just analyze what we did last year, what we are doing current year. And on that basis, they will recommend it to either KPLC or through other government agency where we can get some rebate in our either power tariff or in terms of bonus or in terms of like what we are, power factor we are maintaining, 0.94 and above. So that is our request here.
Okay.
And almost every year by our these in-house mitigation of this energy, we have saved 2 million kilowatt per year.
Okay.
Our per day consumption is 200,000 units. And out of that, if we save even 4%, so at the end of the year, it's become a big volume. So in that case, KM has to just support heavy industries, because heavy industries like steel and cement, they cannot say that we are using biomass or we are using this wind, because they're big machineries, they need to realize on the grid's line only.
Okay.
Like for offices, for other general, as I earlier told you, we are planning for renewable energy through solar.
Okay. Good stuff. And clearly there's a plea there for rebates for consideration and account.
About the rebate?
Please, yes.
Last year, the Finance Act introduced an amendment to Section 15 of the Income Tax Act, where they're supposed to give a 30% of electricity, of rebate for electricity consumed. We've been working on how that will be implemented because the Act required the Ministry of Energy to come up with the guidelines. So the guidelines have been developed between the Ministry of Industry, National Treasury, and Ministry of Energy. The guidelines need to be gazetted, however, because for taxpayers to take advantage of them, we need to have those guidelines gazetted. But that way you'll be able to get a rebate on your power consumption. The next conversation is how we move to a sectoral approach so that over and above the rebate, the sectors that are high consumers of power, like cement and steel, how do we give them an additional rebate over and above the rebate that cuts across the entire industry? So that's a conversation we've started also with the Ministry of Energy, but we are keen to see this one gazetted first so that the industry can take advantage of it from their consumption for last year. Okay. Yeah, but there's something in the finance bill already.
I'm just staying with you, and before I invite questions from the audience, there's been a lot of conversation around we have all this renewable energy pumping into the national grid, but distribution remains a challenge. I know this is a question maybe KETRACO or the government would be better positioned to address, but what do you feel about the transmission network and what is being done about it from a CAM perspective?
As we said, we have over 2,700 megawatts on the grid, but the highest we get in terms of consumption is 1,800 megawatts. Meaning that, first of all, we need to grow demand as a country, because unless we grow demand, we'll be paying for the entire 2,700 plus megawatts. So for me, that's really about the Big Four agenda. How do we drive manufacturing to grow, to be able to consume the power that has been put on the grid? The other key thing is transmission, because we talk about the 2,700 megawatts on the grid, but if you go to certain parts of the country, our industries, say in Western Kenya, for example, are struggling with getting power 24/7. A lot of the time you're there, they're either using generators or the power fluctuations are too high. And that is really about the transmission. So we have the power, but is it getting to where it needs to be utilized? So a lot of investment, I think, needs to go into transmission of power so that we ensure that as we generate this power, we are transmitting it to where it is required. That way people are able to utilize what is already on the grid, and there's then a justification to either increase it or to work together with the Ministry of Industry to grow the demand so that we have more industries locally consuming the power that we are producing.
Wangari?
I'd like to add that we're at 56% access to the grid. And with the last mile project, we've had about 500,000 people connected to the grid in the last year. So yes, we are progressing well, but we're just scratching the surface. There's still so much to be done. And I think one of the key things that we need to really consider, you already mentioned COSAP, so with mini grids that need to be established maybe in more rural areas, and mini grids are at the level of the grid, so when the grid does finally arrive, it just can connect into a certain mini grid, maybe with renewable energy generation capacity. And I think that's a major opportunity that we can now look into, and will also be looked into with the new energy bill coming in.
All right. And at this point, I'd like to invite some questions from the audience. We've been discussing matters, clean renewable energy. We've discussed a regulation framework which has recently come into play. We've discussed issues of finance, which certainly is a key challenge that is being faced across the industry. And how do we begin to de-risk some of this investment so that we can have more participation from the private sector? And I would just request that before you ask your questions, kindly introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and just stand up. We would appreciate if you could stand and shoot your question to whichever panelist you would, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Brian Waswa from Two Rivers Power Company. My question goes to EABL. You say that your energy mix, 70% is from thermal, 30% is from the grid. And since this is a clean energy conference, I would like to understand why you are on thermal, because then you are contributing to global warming. The other question will be, also the first question is to explain why you're on thermal. The second question is your cost per kilowatt hour for thermal energy versus the cost per kilowatt hour for grid energy. Then the last question is, why are you not connected to the 132 kV grid from Kenya Power, which I'm sure is going to be cheap for you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other question? There are a number of hands on this side, as well as here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Samu Par from Delpro Power Solutions. My question goes to Phyllis Wakiaga of KAM. I think I speak for everyone when I say that new technologies coming into Kenya is very difficult. It takes a long time before new technologies are accepted. Would it be possible to come up with like a pilot center where these new technologies can be put in and it can be tested and can be showcased? Because a lot of industries would say, where has this been done in Kenya before? And I think also that goes for Kenya Green Building Society as well. So if these things are tested and showcased locally, then industries like Mombasa Cement, EABL, and others can be very keen to take it on because they can see it in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. There's a hand on this side.
I'm Lama Kosieko, conflict mediator, Nairobi County Peace Forum. My question goes to Madam Wakiaga, because when we are talking about energy, you cannot link it with the environmental conservation. And you did mention about Lake Turkana when you were addressing us. Lake Turkana is drying up. River Mara is drying up. Naivasha is on its deathbed. And there is no any law enacted to protect this source of water. What are you doing to safeguard, to protect the source of energy? Because water is the main source of energy. In the US, they tried and revived and protect some of the lakes which were drying up. And here in Kenya, nothing is being done. I think we are waiting for the manna from heaven, which happened some years back before we were not there. We were not there and will not be there again to see it. Let us work on that. Josie, I think your company, Mombasa Cement, is doing a good job. I think you are ahead of the pack. But seems Mombasa Cement is not a team player. Why don't you bring up East African breweries, the rest of the farms, private sector, so that whatever you are doing there can also be emulated by other firms? Thanks.
Thank you. Final question before we invite our panelists to address the issues raised.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name is William Masore. I work for the county government of Kiambu. I have 3 good questions. The first question goes to KMA. Well, there are so many regulators, particularly in the environment and energy sector, like ERC and the NEMA and the building codes. What are you doing to harmonize this so that they don't scare the investor? Because Kenya as a country, we are very interested in investors, whether domestic or international. Then the second question, I think I'm throwing it to anybody who can answer from the panel. The question is, we are in a digital revolution. So what are you doing to use the digital revolution to leverage the uptake of clean energy, to increase the uptake of universal increase of uptake of clean energy? Then the third question, you are talking of industries and you are talking of Kenya as a country, but nobody is addressing Wanjiko, the grassroots people. So I'm asking, are there available and attractive options which are market-based solutions so that can increase the coverage of the clean energy at grassroots level, particularly at household level? Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. At this point, I'd like to invite the panelists to address some of the issues raised. If I could start with Phyllis, there have been a number of questions shot your way. And the first one was, can we have a pilot center? Someone was asking, can we have a pilot center just for people to come and get a sense of what is happening? As well as the environmental conservation issue which was raised. Phyllis.
Thank you for the question. Samuel asked about, actually his was a suggestion on whether we can have a pilot center to showcase new technology. It's a good idea and something we can look into. the reason we also started having the Clean Energy Expo is to also showcase, because I think when you go outside, you'll see that we have a number of people showcasing new technologies and new inventions. So I think the issue of having a pilot where we can have them showcased is a good idea and something we can look into as an association. The next question came from Lamek, who was concerned about water and asking what we are doing. As an association, what we are doing currently is we've started carrying out water audits for the last 4 years because there's a lot of emphasis on energy. But the same is true of water, that we have to be very conscious about how we utilize our water because of the concerns that you raise, which are valid concerns. So we've been undertaking water audits for industry and looking at both their water use and their wastewater, how they manage that, and working with them to see how we can increase the awareness around water. For most of us, because our water bill looks low, it appears that water is not a challenge, but we don't sometimes take into consideration the true cost of water. What it costs sometimes even to pump that water, to clean the water before you release it when you have your effluent waste and other things. So our water audits are helping us identify some of the areas for improvement within industry, and some of our members who've been able to undertake them have made a lot of positive improvements. We are also recognizing companies that are efficient in their water use during our water awards. And we've put together a Kenya Industrial Water Alliance, which I chair on behalf of the association, that brings together different players, both from government and national and county governments and the industry, to try and figure out how we become more efficient in use of water, and a lot of work and conversation is happening in that area regarding water. Then William had a question about the multiple regulators. For manufacturers, that's a big concern. We are keen about having a predictable and stable policy environment. The challenge with multiple regulators sometimes is that there's a lot of duplication when it comes to regulation. So it's one of our advocacy priorities under the manufacturing priority agenda. We are looking at how do we harmonize and reduce the duplication within regulatory agencies, because it does become onerous and a big burden for business when you're having to report to different agencies, sometimes on even the same thing. So it's an area that we engage the government a lot on to ensure that we harmonize how we regulate the environment for manufacturers. Thanks.
All right, and
I was going to say, let me add on to the question about technologies and the showcase, the new technologies coming into the market. We're actually, KGBS is working on a green building product, green building product database, where new technologies that might not necessarily have been considered before as sustainable or green, just because of how quickly the market is developing, are being brought in. And the issue is that they still have to undergo heavy duties, especially on importation, because they're not yet on the list of exempt products. So what we're doing is we're working to an example is heat pumps. Heat pumps are a bit more efficient than solar hot water solar hot water. And solar hot water is in legislation, so it's exempt from tax, but heat pumps are not. And this is something that we're now lobbying through KEPSA. We're lobbying the Ministry of Energy, we're lobbying the government and the ERC to make sure that these other technologies are also exempt from those duties that you're mentioning. I was also going to mention that UNEA4 had a showcase on some of these products that the past conference that we just had a showcase of some of the products that you're talking about. But definitely I agree with you that we need something more permanent, something that you can walk in and out, especially if you're building a house or building a building, and want to see some of these sustainable technologies come into play. Yeah, I think that's all.
Let me bring in Samuel. There was a question from Brian in terms of why is EABL still on thermal, and what cost dichotomy, if I could call it, are you looking at when you're looking at your energy mix?
So thanks for the question, Brian. Just to reconfirm that we are on 70-30, 70% thermal, 30% electrical. Now, when I look at my bills in terms of electrical energy and HFO, they are like for like. I mean, it's 70 million for thermal, 70 million for electrical energy per month. So to substitute really is really not something that we really want to go into right now, because we have ambitious plans. If you look at our performance ambitions for 2025 as Diageo, because KBL belongs to the greater Diageo family, is that we have to reduce our energy base by 5% year on year in disregard of volume growth. That is an ambitious target. It's an ambitious thing to do. So what we have looked at, first of all, is how can we substitute 100% fossil fuel usage on site and across the markets in Diageo by, first of all, going biomass, which is something that we have already done. So we are going into 100% biomass in the next 1 year. So when we meet here next year time like this, perhaps we'll have gone through 50% of the installation and design qualifications and all those things for installation of a mega project for biomass. Next is solar energy. I did talk about it earlier, that we have an ambitious plan in next 1.5 years to install a 4 megawatt plant of solar power. That will completely change the terrain and the geography on which we operate as a business, and perhaps lead the pack in terms of the business across East Africa on a company that has completely transited in terms of that energy mix. Now, why are we not on 132 kilovolt line? We are on 66 kV, and it serves us completely well. We have worked closely with KPLC on quality issues that sometimes emanate from dips and spikes and other voltage occasionally. And we have a platform that addresses that through KEM on the Association of Large Energy Consumers, which is a live platform. Now, when it comes to then understanding what we are actually doing around that, is that we, as a site, our base load is quite high. To start the plant, you use somewhere in excess of 12 megawatts to start the plant. So we have looked at that. We have very clear plans, and our performance ambition is, of course, driven by what commitments in form of stewardship we have also committed irrevocably to the communities and to the vast environment under which we operate. So we are looking at that. We will check if 66 continues to be the best option. If it doesn't, of course, we can upgrade. But of course, it comes with a huge investment, which I don't think we need to go into right now, because 66 serves us quite well.
Thank you. G2, there was a question from Lamek, which is of, suggests that you don't have synergy with the industry, and in terms of team playing with the rest of the players. What do you have to say?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you to Mr. Lamak for appreciation on our energy efficiency work. And I just want to inform him, our experienced technical team has done so many mitigation to energy efficiency, and we are welcome to anyone who wants to just visit us. We will give them what we did, we will show them. And even if they want our email, we will communicate with them through email also.
And just before I take the final question, before I take them from there was a question on Wanjiku and how are we cascading this to the grassroots level? If I could throw this to Wangari, then Phyllis maybe.
I think I had mentioned before with the affordable housing project or Big Four agenda that's come on. One of the key considerations we need to look at is affordability doesn't just mean, you can buy the house for under 2 million shillings. It means that you can pay your water bill, you can pay your energy bill. And I think that's where renewable energy elements need to come into that. So we're working closely with the Department of Housing, PS Charles Hinga himself, just to make sure that sustainability is actually incorporated into these affordable housing projects, whether it means using more efficient bulbs, whether it means using more efficient flow rate taps, so that you're not using as much water and electricity, and also finding ways to deal with waste, because wastewater and waste, because that's a big health hazard. So you don't want to be in an affordable house and have higher energy bills because you're not taking care of your wastewater and your waste properly. So this is how we're dealing with it from the Kenya Green Building Society side of things.
Phyllis, on Wanjiku.
For the Association of Manufacturers, for us, Wanjiko, first of all, is the employer at the farm level. So when we work with industries and we make them more conscious about their energy use, you're working with people who live in society, who are part of society. So they're able to carry some of that consciousness even to their own households. When we are doing work around water efficiency, at the end of the day, it's to ensure that we have a cleaner environment for everyone, and that we have a better quality of life for all the citizens. So the work we do impacts directly on Wanjiko. If we are using clean energy, if we are conscious about how we discharge our effluent waste, we are just ensuring that we have a clean environment for everyone, and that we are part of the whole climate change and what is happening, contributing to reduced emissions, and in that way being part of the bigger picture in terms of creating a better environment for all Kenyans.
All right. Yeah. And final two questions. There's a gentleman here with his hand up. I'm looking for gender parity. And owing to the constraints of time, we can take two questions first. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm David Ogol. I'm a private consultant. My question goes to Madam Phyllis of KM. We know the cost of power inhibits our industrial development and innovation, yet we have local innovators who have the skills that can narrow down the gap in the renewable energy sector. Is there a collaboration between the CAM and Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy in coming up with the incubation centers, in training our local innovators and motivating them? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Willis Memo. I work with the Water Resources Authority, currently based in Nakuru, Rift Valley catchment area. I'm trying to look at the water energy nexus and trying to look at the manufacturing sector. I know water is a factor of production. It helps to catalyze production in all the fields. But has there been a deliberate attempt to look at the cost of cleaning that water after use because of issues of what is the amount of energy required to clean the water? The experience from the field indicates that most factories, most industries, they don't actually conform. They just discharge water without treatment into the water sources. And this is really affecting our water resources. So what has been done and what can we learn from this?
Thank you. I think we'll take those two questions. Phyllis, the first one was to you in terms of incubation for local innovators.
Thank you very much, David, for your question. You're right that the cost of power inhibits investment, and that is why we are working as an advocacy organization with the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Industry to see how we can bring down the cost of power to a single-digit amount. Hopefully that can happen over the next few years. The rebate is supposed to hopefully help us address that, and we've had the time of use tariff in the past. The issue about incubation for local inventors, through the Clean Energy Expo, the one we've carried out in the past, we've been able to take the local innovators who have showcased at our expo to the Ministry of Energy, and the PS has been able to meet with them and understand what they are doing in the bid to see how they can support such innovators as a Ministry of Energy. We can take this even further, and we are keen to see through discussions with yourself what exactly you would like us to put in place with the Ministry of Energy. But they are very keen, and in the past we've taken the people who've exhibited to meet with the PS and the CS at the ministry. The issue of the water energy nexus is real, and as I said, a lot of the time industries are not quite clear about the true cost of water. Because when they look at water, they just look at the water bill, and that appears to be the true cost. But you're right, even things like water treatment, which take a lot of energy, are part of that cost. As the Kenya Industrial Water Alliance and the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, those are some of the issues we want to work on so that we raise more awareness to industry about the true cost of water and the energy water nexus, so that we can see more consciousness within industry in how they utilize the same. Regarding water treatment, we also work closely with NEMA to raise awareness to our members on what is required in terms of water treatment, and it's something that industry is required to do, and we ensure that NEMA and KAM are raising awareness to industry on what is required of them, so that we are able to treat our water even before we discharge it.
All right, thank you for that. We have just a little under 5 minutes to wrap up this conversation. And I want to take the final comments from the panelists in terms of moving this conversation forward beyond this conference. What should be done? If I could start with you very briefly.
Thank you. The platform that currently exists through KEM, we have the collaboration workshops that we normally have and exchange programs. I think we need to really work on that so that it is thrived all over again and it's working very well. We've hosted several teams on site, and I think we need to open doors for networking purposes, also for sharing of best practices. Also challenges, of course, because your challenges may not be my challenges are not your challenges, and we have opportunities to really cross-skill one another. We have excellence in this room in terms of energy conservation, water conservation. I think if we opened up our doors to all of ourselves, I think there's a huge, huge opportunity that we can get there. Just to go back slightly on the issue of water retreatment and everything, I think the issue is completely, you're in good space in terms of asking. We comply 100% to regulatory issues in terms of water treatment and discharge water that is almost drinkable, only because we cannot, again, use it on site. So some of the business, like EABL, for example, has a huge project coming up for water treatment, treated water reuse into the site, and that would reduce the water use by another 30% or something, which is huge because it would reduce the cost of water. So I think if you ask for me, the burning platform on this issue is let us network, let us open our doors to any one of us and build the systems that are likely to help us to get to the marriages that we are looking for. Thanks.
Thank you. Phyllis, briefly.
As CAM, we'll continue to organize opportunities for networking and benchmarking, which we already do, a lot of industry visits. But 3 areas that we still think are challenges and areas for improvement. One of them is still access to finance, since the facilities available are not accessible to everyone, and we've talked about finance, but it's an area that, as we move forward, we need to continue to focus on. The issue of technical capacity gaps within industry also slows down the implementation of some of the things, and we need to enhance capacity to be able to address this. And then last but not least, we want to continue to create awareness to industry on the issues of environmental responsibility and sustainability of industry. Because with that increased awareness, I think we'll see industry taking up a lot of the new technologies and ensuring that they're more conscious about everything that they do to ensure that we have the green growth of our economy.
Thank you. Wangari?
Fantastic. I have 4 points in terms of just closing this conversation off. And I think the first one is the issue of just determining what our competing priorities are. In the new energy bill, we have nuclear, we have wind, we have geothermal. They're all stated. There's plans for all of them to expand. But just with one wind farm, Lake Turkana wind farm, the potential for it to expand is up to 3,000 megawatts. And as Phyllis has already said, our consumption in total is 2,700. So if we can look at those priorities and say, okay, how are we going to expand to a full 100% clean energy future, we need to also see that we're using the lowest cost energy option, also the most efficient, and also the best for our country, given that we have certain kind of things that we need to look into. Another point that I'd like to say is, and Phyllis has already touched on this, it's the financing. Looking at blended finance, looking at creative ways to fund these projects is the next way to do it. Looking at creative ways to have off-takers is also the way to get these projects off board. There's a lot of projects sitting in the pipeline at the Ministry of Energy. Some already have PPAs, but they can't start construction. And this is because even our grid, in terms of technology, cannot take on any new capacity from renewable energy. And I think that's the last point, and I think this is something we've not really touched on here, is the pricing of land. A lot of projects are not passing that financial approval stage because land is very expensive. So finding ways that we can finance these projects, whether it's leasing from local communities, then creating a new income for the local community, how we do with our camps in the Mara. There's new ways that we can also ensure that the land is affordable for these projects to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Jitu, final remarks?
Yeah, as Phyllis said about this communication to industries visit, that is a one point. And from initial our own house, we have started Energy Management System Committee as well as Water Management System Committee. So through that committee, we want to convey to the society that how we have to save the energy, why we have to save the energy, why we have to save the water. Because we cannot go everywhere, but our employees, those who are staying there, they will tell to his neighbor, tell to his friend, what is the importance of the saving energy and what is the importance of saving water. So that activity we have started, and we are educating our own team, our own staff on these activities. And these all doing by our senior technical peoples. We are involving our commercial people, our marketing people, everybody. So whenever they will go into the market, they will just spread these also, why we have to save the energy, why we have to save the water.
Thank you very much. And right, that has been Top in Business, focusing on the 5th edition, the opening session of the 5th edition of the Clean Energy Conference, where the theme is sustaining the clean energy market in Kenya. We've had a raft of issues discussed here from the regulation standpoint, as well as financing and how to de-risk some of the investments which would enable private investors to come more robustly into this space of renewable and clean energy. And that's it from us at Safari Park. We'd like to appreciate our panelists. We've had Samuel Muiru from East African Breweries Limited. We've had Phyllis Wakiaga as well from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We've had Wangari Mushiri from the Kenya, board member from the Kenya Green Building Society, and Jitu Joshi from Mombasa Cement. We really appreciate your contribution. We'd like to thank our guests, our audience, who have shot some really burning questions, eliciting us into conversation on issues which we would have otherwise overlooked in this discussion. We'd like to thank the Nation Media, NTV, and Business Daily, the Top in Business umbrella, for this kind of discussion, and we leave it at that for this moment. But the conversation continues online under the hashtag KAM Clean Energy 2019.